Chapter 43. Time's up. Let Laurel go, Wolf said. Butch smiled. Only if you let Grace get onto the chopper with Yvonne. Wolf shook his head. Here's another incentive for you, Butch continued, still smiling. We have a man below, and he has Marty. Be a shame if something bad happened to your nephew. They have Marty? Grace screamed. Wolf clamped her mouth shut. He wanted to tell her that they didn't have Marty after all, but he couldn't without tipping his head. I'll go, Grace said. No, Wolf said. They'll kill Marty and Laurel, Grace said. I couldn't live with that. You couldn't live with that, Wolf. We need to stop this right now. This feud has to end. Wolf took her hand. It's not a feud. And you don't know everything that's going on. Grace, you can't go with Noah Blackwood. Luther was watching everything unfold on the gizmo. He had even heard the exchange between Ted and Wolf. He wanted to help, but what could he do? To get to the moon pool, he would have to walk right past everyone on deck. He pushed a button on the gizmo. Ted? Yeah. Who's this? Luther. Where are you? Luther told him, along with everything else that was going on. From the helipad, Blackwood motioned to the pilot to start the chopper, then looked back at Wolf and shouted, Let her go, Travis. You lost this one. Admit it. Cut your losses. You'll have your giant squid. E-Wolf is secure. I have as much right to have Grace as you do. If you don't let her go, Dr. Lee will die. Marty will die. And for what? You know I'm not going to give up until Grace is with me. You can't win. You can't have her, Noah, Wolf shouted back. I'm her father. She belongs with me. I promised Rose you would never get her, and I'm not going to break that promise. Grace looked up at her father and knew he meant what he said. He looked at Laurel, who had not flinched through this whole ordeal. She looked as calm as she had the first day Grace had seen her in the library on Kryptos. She looked at Butch. She had no doubt that Butch would kill Laurel and Marty when his man dragged him up on deck. All it would take was a simple nod from her grandfather. She jerked her hand out of Wolf's and ran back over to Yvonne. I want to go with my grandfather, she said. Yvonne grabbed her by the arm. You can't mean that, Wolf said. I mean it. She looked at Yvonne. Let's go before I change my mind. Butch started to make his way to the helipad with Laurel. Wolf stared in helpless disbelief. Luther ran down to the deck and shouted at Grace, Are you crazy? Remind Marty that he squeezed Monkey's arm. He shouted back. What? Just tell him. Yeah, fine. But Luther had not raced down from the bridge to determine if Grace was crazy. He had come down to delay Blackwood's departure because he knew Marty, Ted, and Leopold hadn't found the last pack of C4. But now he wasn't so sure about Grace's sanity. What was she talking about? He wanted to tell her that they didn't have Marty. But just like Wolf, he knew he couldn't. The men lifted Grace up to the helipad. Noah Blackwood took his grandfather's hand. He tore off her blue tracking tag and dropped it on the deck. You won't be needing this collar anymore. At the Ark, you don't treat people like dogs. There was another reason Luther had come out of hiding. Grace, he shouted, don't let the old man bug you. Be a dragon. What? I said be a dragon. Grace felt something move in her shirt pocket, but to avoid attracting her grandfather's attention. Don't look down. I will, Luther. Thanks. What about Pepper? One of Noah's men shouted. Luther swore under his breath. No point in hiding anything now, he thought. They're about ready to take off. He can't make it, Luther shouted back. He's having lunch with a giant squid. Guess that makes us even, Butch said, smiling. I got Roy. You got Pepper. Butch was the last to board the helicopter. As he got in, he thought about shooting Laurel just to see the look on Wolf's face, but he let her go. Wolf already looked devastated at the loss of his daughter, and they'd all be dead soon enough anyway. The helicopter took off. PD, Congo, and Bo came scrambling onto the deck. Bo was carrying a brown wig in one hand and what looked like a clump of gray clay in the other. Luther took refuge behind Al, but Bo didn't seem interested in his hair, nor did she seem nearly as crazed as she had a few hours ago. Wolf walked over to her. He hid the wig behind her back. You can have the hair, Wolf said. Just give me the other thing. Bo handed it to him. It was a brick of C4 with 2 wires dangling from it, one yellow, one blue. Wolf threw the brick over the side in angry disgust, then keyed the radio. We'll have the final charge. Bo had it. Luckily, she pulled out the wires in the right order, Ted said. There is nothing lucky about this day, Wolf said. Blackwood has grace. I'm sorry, Wolf, Ted said quietly. I'll be up soon. Chapter 44, Amazing Grace. Ted found Marty and Leopold frantically searching the stern for the last charge. Bo found it, he said. She brought it up to the main deck and Wolf tossed it over the side. So we're safe, Marty asked. We're not going to sink, if that's what you mean, Ted answered. What about the giant squid? Leopold asked. Secured and doing fine. I spliced power from the orb to the moon pool. The doors closed and the room is pressurized. I better get down there and monitor the squid, Leopold said happily and quickly headed in that direction. What's the matter? Marty asked. He could tell by Ted's somber mood that he hadn't told him everything. Blackwood got the hatchlings, Ted answered. How did that happen? That's not all, Ted said. Blackwood also has grace. Marty stared at him, not sure he had heard correctly. What? She's gone. Butch must have grabbed her from the lab. Marty took off running. On his way up to the main deck, he ran into a concerned-looking Phil Bishop. Is it true? Marty asked. Phil nodded. Blackwood won. He got the hatchlings and grace. He just took off with them in the helicopter, along with Butch and Yvonne. Yvonne? She was working for Blackwood all along. She's the one who drugged Bo and let her loose. I'm on my way to Lab 9 to check on Bertha and Anna. Yvonne drugged them, too, with a tranquilizer gun. I hope they're okay, Marty said, continuing up to the main deck. What he found was a grim group of people staring at a helicopter hovering about a half a mile away. Bo was hanging over the rail, hooting out Winkin, Blinkin, and Nod. Beatty and Congo had joined her and were barking and screeching at the dolphins. Wolf and Laurel were holding hands. Luther was standing a few feet away from them, looking down at his gizmo. I lost her, Wolf said. I'm sorry, Marty. We'll have to get her back, Marty said. Luther glanced up at the gizmo. Just before she took off, she told me to tell you that you squeezed Monkey's arm. Huh? Don't make sense to me either, Luther said, and looked back down at the gizmo. We'll get Grace and the hatchlings back. Al assured them. And I'm going to pay Butch back for killing Roy, if that's the last thing I do. How did he get her? Marty asked. She got away from me and went with him willingly, Wolf answered. No way, Marty said. She didn't have a choice, Laurel said. Butch had a gun to my head and would have killed me. She thought they had you, too. Grace gave herself up for us. Endangered 1 and Endangered 2 had pulled their anchors and were moving away. The remaining pirates had boarded the fishing trawler, and it, too, chugged away. Theo Sonborn came up on deck with his hands in his pockets and stood about 10 feet away from the group. Why is Blackwood just hovering there? Marty asked. Because he thinks the charges are still in place, and he wants to see us blown out of the water, Al answered. I can't believe Grace is gone, Marty said. Maybe not for long, Luther said. What are you talking about? Wolf asked. What's the range between the Dragon Spy and the Gizmo? I don't know, Wolf answered, glancing at Theo. Maybe 5 miles, but it's like a tracking tag. With the satellite, we can find it anywhere, and we can see what it's seeing. We're building more of them. As soon as they're finished, we're sending a swarm down to the Amazon to look for Marty's parents. Why? The Dragon Spy is in her shirt pocket, Luther said, and she knows it. She just looked down at it and winked at me. Wolf grabbed the gizmo. He and Marty and Laurel stared at the screen. All they could see was pink fabric. Wolf turned on the audio, but he couldn't pick up their voices. The helicopter rotors were too loud. Chapter 45, Hovering. Grace saw the sun reflecting off Marty's golden aquasuit. She couldn't see him clearly, but she knew it was him, and she knew how frustrated he was right now with her, so close yet unreachable. She hoped she'd been looking at the gizmo when she winked. She hoped he knew why she really left. She was in the back of the helicopter with the two soldiers, Butch and Yvonne, who were treating Butch's shoulder wound. Her grandfather was in the co-pilot seat. He looked back at her and pointed to his headset, indicating for her to slip a pair on herself. She did. Are you doing all right? He asked cheerfully. Yes, she answered. I'm glad to finally have you with me, Grace. This is how it should have been from the very beginning. We're going to have a wonderful life together. But I do have a question for you. What is it? Why did you decide to come with me? Grace knew the question was coming, and she was prepared for it. Curiosity, she answered. I landed in the middle of this family feud, but I'm not a part of it. Someone had to put an end to it. I don't want anything bad to happen to Wolf or to you. Wolf is going to come after you, Noah said. He's going to come after the dinosaurs. I decide who I stay with, Grace said. It's not up to either of you. I have another question, Noah said. What did you mean by squeezing the monkey's arm? It's a private joke between Marty and me. Bo doesn't like it when we squeeze her arm. For your information, Noah said, Bo is a bonbo chimpanzee. Therefore, she is an ape, not a monkey. Wow, Grace said, although she knew full well that chimpanzee was an ape. Oh, the things I will be able to teach you, Noah said. He turned back to the front, his hand resting on the remote detonator, debating with himself. He wanted to see the Kolnikov explode, but he might have to forego the pleasure. If he blew up the ship in front of Grace, he would probably lose her forever, even though he had her in hand. The detonator had an effective range of 15 miles. At that distance, he wouldn't be able to see or hear the explosion, but neither would Grace. Let's head out, he told the pilot, taking note of the exact position of the chopper's GPS. Where are we going? Grace asked. One of my private jets is waiting for us in Wilmington, New Zealand. We'll fly back to the States. We'll need to get our two friends to a proper facility as quickly as we can. Good idea, Grace said. I'm sure they're not very comfortable in those bags. Grace allowed herself a small smile. Noah had people working for him on Crypto's Island, she thought. Now Wolf has someone working for him at the Ark. This was the only way she could save Laurel and Marty, protect the hatchlings, and find out who her grandfather really was. At exactly 14 miles, Noah Blackwood pushed the button on the detonator. He closed his eyes and imagined the explosion and the expressions of surprise on the crew's faces. He allowed himself a small smile, too. Chapter 46, Tentacles. 5 minutes after the detonator was pushed, Theo Sonborn said, I guess I better get down to the engine room and see if I can get this rusty bucket of bolts together. Bolts started. I could use some help. I'll go, Luther volunteered. I'll help you too, Laurel offered. But first, I'm going to check on Bertha and Anna. Wolf said he would be down in a few minutes. He joined Marty at the rail, where he was staring at the empty sky where the helicopter had been. We'll get her back, Wolf said, and we'll find her parents. Marty kept his eyes fixed on the sky and did not respond. I should have left you and Grace at Omega Prep, Wolf continued. I should have never come back into your life. If I'd stayed away, you'd both be safe. None of this would have happened. Marty looked up at his uncle. You're right, he said at last. But the thing is, if you hadn't shown up, we'd still be living a lie. I know now that Grace and I aren't twins, but we're still connected like we are. I know what she's thinking. She went with Blackwood to save me and Laura, but that's not the only reason. She went because she wants to know the truth, and the only person who knows the whole story is Noah Blackwood. Grace had to go with him. We'll get her back, but not until she gets what she wants. Marty let go of the rail and started to walk away. Where are you going? Wolf asked. Marty stopped and looked back at his uncle. Grace knew this was going to happen. How could she know that? She just knows things, Marty said. I don't know how, and neither does she. What I do know is that I squeezed Monkey's arm. And what was that all about? Wolf asked. I promised. I told Grace I would untangle the things in that old trunk. Ted snagged a giant squid. Blackwood snagged Grace and the hatchlings. It's time I put out my tentacles to see what I can snag. Below the thunders of the upper deep. Tennyson, Wolf said. From the poem, The Kranken? Right, Marty replied. Do you want to help? I guess I'd better, Wolf said. They went below to see what they could discover in the upper deep.